Focus here.
I'm so conceited that I have to videotape myself.
Oh no, sorry.
Truth is that I have to do this for a class project. I have to videotape my preaching for a preaching class. And so the message actually has to be short this morning. So, you guys are in for a treat. Now, here's the thing, here's the deal. If this message is great, it's because of me. I did it. It's great. It's wonderful. If this message is terrible, we're going to blame Dr. Pate. That's my professor, so it's his fault if it's not very good. We have to do a certain kind of message. So, anyway, did we change it? All right. There it is. Our title for today is un-I-fied. Now, if you really look at that word, does anybody know what that word says? What's that? Unified, that's right, exactly, unified. Now if you break it down, that sort of does creak a lot. If you break it down, unified is actually un-I, not me, less of me, un-I-fied. So unified is to be less of us, less of me. The story I have to tell today, this morning, is a story about me, when I was a kid. I was probably 15, 16 years old playing baseball. I was a first baseman by trade. I was great at first base. I was wonderful. I was good, really good, not to toot my own horn. But every once in a while, my dad, who was my coach, he would put me in as a pitcher. I hated pitching. Pitching was terrible. It was the worst thing ever. I did not like it. I was not any good at it. But my dad would throw me in because I was super slow. My fastball was slow. And my changeup, which is a slower fastball, was even slower. It was terrible, and I hated it. I was so embarrassed because I was a terrible pitcher. I would hit the strike zone, I was consistent at that, but it was just so slow. And the reason my dad would put me in there is because I was slow. And batters, he would put me in against teams that had great batters, that were used to hitting fastball pitchers, that were used to hitting really good pitchers. So my dad would put me in there to throw these guys off because I was so terribly slow. So sad, isn't it? You tell your kid, you know what, I'm going to pitch you because you're slow. It's terrible. Great self-confidence booster. But anyway, one day, it was the beginning of my last season I played baseball. We were playing the team that had the best hitters, the best team. And this guy, his name was Kenny, and he found out that I was pitching a couple days before the game. And at school, all this guy did was just rib me and ride me and tell me how he's going to rope me and he's going to take me to the fence and he's going to put it out of the park. He's going to get this home run. And I was like, no way, dude, I'm going to strike you out. You're terrible. I was going to strike you out, bashing each other, And finally the game day came. I was psyched up. I was ready to go. This guy, all of his jabbering and everything kind of got in my head. And so when we faced each other, he came up to bat and I pitched. And I was so over anxious, so confident, so excited to get this guy out that I pitched terribly. It was the worst experience I've ever pitched. It was terrible. And I ended up walking him in four pitches. I walked him and he got to first base. It was terrible. And I'm so dejected, I'm mad, I'm frustrated. And this guy gets on first base and I hear him say, "Hargett, I told you that you wouldn't strike me out," and I lost it. I was so mad. I threw down my glove. I started running over to first base. Benches cleared, and we were going to handle it. I was going to drop this fool, man. I was going to put him on the ground. I was going to knock him out. And then the benches cleared. Coaches came out, separated us. I was so mad. None of us got ejected. Neither one of us got ejected, got thrown out of the game, which is a good thing. And then my dad, just to prove a point, kept me in on the mound. He kept me pitching, he kept me throwing. And I was so frustrated. By the end of the inning, I was just so mad and so, just frustrated. And then finally I got to sit down because I just couldn't do it anymore. The funny thing about that story, I could tell you that we were unified as a team because we all came out together and we were going to fight together as a team, or that we were unified because, you know, we ended up doing whatever. But here's the real part of the story. About a week later, we find out that the rules had changed, the district had changed, the lines of the boundaries would change. And this guy, Kenny, was actually in my team's district. And so he had two choices. He could either quit and not play baseball anymore, or he could join my team. Irony as it was, he joined my team. I wanted nothing to do with this guy. This guy was a thorn in my side. I just wanted nothing to do with this guy. And we started playing, we started practicing, and everything that we did opposite each other. We didn't want to practice together, we didn't want to play together, we didn't talk during the practice or anything like that. In fact, our team suffered actually because of it. We started to lose games. We started to go from our second place ranking down to like 4th or 5th. And out of 3 teams, that's pretty bad if you're, I'm just kidding, terrible. But anyway, we dropped. So finally, my dad took us aside, and after running laps and laps and laps and laps to prove that he is coach, he sat us down and he talked to us and said, "You guys are a team. You guys both have strengths that no one else has. You guys both have strengths that neither one of you guys have." Kenny actually was a great pitcher. He was phenomenal. He could hit too, so he was an all-around guy. I was great on first base, and I could hit. So when we finally got our heads together and we started realizing that we weren't fighting against each other, and we were all on the same team, like that, it was overnight. Our team rose the ranks, and we ended up taking first place in our division that year. All-Stars came, and we did terrible because we beat some teams that were really good, but that's the pleasant point. But we came together as a team, and we unified, and we had a same goal. We were going to go, and we were going to win our team division. And we did. Now, all of us have that same thing when we go to a job, when we go to work, when we have whatever. We have those guys in there that the job is all about them. The job is all about what they can do, how great they are. Anybody have any guys like that at work? I'll give you a hint. If you're not raising your hand, I would be careful who it could be. But anyway, we all have those guys at work that they think they're greater than everybody, they think they're better than everybody, and they're divisive in your job, in your workplace. They're divisive. Nobody likes to be with that guy. Nobody likes to work with that guy. That's the guy that's always telling you how terrible you are. And he's divisive. He splits the team apart. He splits the workplace apart. When you're at work and this guy's telling you how great he is, you don't want nothing to do with him. And then if it's great, it's on him, kind of like me and Dr. Pate. If it's terrible, it's going to be Dr. Pate's fault. We have that guy. It's divisive. It's splitting. Same thing in marriage. If you guys are in a marriage and you got one person in the marriage that thinks everything rides on their shoulders, everything is part of them, that they are in charge, that they are ruling the roost, that marriage is divisive. You have one wanting to go one way, one wanting to go there. Have you guys ever seen my marriage pyramid? I should have made a PowerPoint slide for it, but I didn't. But if you take your fingers, you go like this, everybody do this, and it would work for work too, all right? At the very point where your 2 fingers are, that's God, all right? At the little angle in your thumbs, that's you, all right? You and your spouse, or you and a coworker. As you guys are working together towards Christ, you guys are coming together. You guys have a united front. You guys are unified because you guys have a common goal, a common thing that you guys are worshiping and working together for. Now, if you take your finger and do this, we'll put this and this being ourselves, going away from God, going against God. And what happens is you actually separate. You actually are fighting against each other. You guys are actually like 2 unequally yoked donkeys, mules, beasts of burden that are pulling against each other. When they're equally yoked, you've got a straight line. If one's stronger than the other one, they're pulling apart. One's pulling the other way. And that's what happens in marriage, that's what happens in work, that's what happens on a baseball team. If you guys are pulling against each other, you guys are divisive, and the thing will not win. The thing will not be accomplished. The goal will not be accomplished. Anybody know who Johnny Manziel is? Johnny Manziel was the football player from college, and he was really great. And then that terrible team, the Cleveland Browns, picked him up, and then he was just toxic. This guy was toxic to the team. He wanted his own glory. He wanted his own thing. And in fact, he spent one season with them, and they were like, "You're done, man. We can't have you on our team because nobody wants to work with this guy because he was terrible." Now, the same thing can happen in a church. The same thing can happen inside of the body of Christ. If we don't have something to focus on, if our focus is not together, the church wants to go its own way and do its own thing and be its own person. There becomes groups inside of that. And there's a split, and there'll be a fracture. But if we all have the same common goal, then we are working together and we will accomplish the mission. Does anybody here know what Impact's goal is?
Intentionally make people aware of Christ.
Yes, intentionally make people aware of Christ together. That is how we are going to work. Everything that we do is going to be based on intentionally making people aware of Christ together. And through that glorifies Christ. That glorifies God because we are working together to make people aware of Him and what He's done on that cross. Now, Jesus is He's not unaware of this situation. He's not unaware of divisiveness. He's not unaware of people wanting to do their own thing and be greater than anybody else. Not totally immune to that. In fact, He had to deal with that so much. When He was walking with His disciples, when He was walking with His 12 disciples, He had the disciples come up and say, "Oh, who's greater? Who's going to be greater in heaven? Am I going to be greater in heaven? I want to be greater in heaven." Remember those stories? It was James and John. And in fact, their mom came up and said, "Jesus, can they sit on your right hand? You know, can these guys be in the favored position? Can these guys be the best of all of them?" It's kind of bad when you have your mom fighting for you. But anyway, so Jesus knew what was going on. He had these guys that were constantly divisive. Peter, if you guys remember Peter, everything about Peter, he was in charge. He wanted to be the guy that was running the show all the time. He was the first guy to speak up. He was the first guy to chime in with an answer. "Who do you say I am, Peter?" He was the first guy. So that's Peter. Peter is constantly trying to run the show. You've got these other guys trying to get in the best position. And it's divisive. In fact, Judas was divisive. Later on, we'll see Judas was divisive. He's actually split the group. He went out on his own. But here's what Jesus says. In our first verse, 17, John 17, and verse 11. One more. John 17:11 says this. He's praying. Remember, he's praying in chapter 17. His whole chapter is a prayer. He's praying for himself. He's praying for his disciples, and he'll pray again for us. But he's praying specifically for one thing. The overarching theme in this chapter is unity. It's being unified. He prays about it for himself. He's like, at the very beginning, he said, "Give me the glory that was once with you. Give me honor that I had with you beforehand, before time began." And John 17:11 says this, "Now I am no longer in the world, but these are in the world. And I come to you, Holy Father. Keep through your name those whom you have given me, that they may be one as we are." So Jesus is praying. He's saying, you know what? I know these guys. I know these guys are split. And I know that if I leave them to themselves, if I leave them to do what they want to do, this guy's going to go that way and do what he wants to do. This guy's going to go that way and do what he wants to do. So I'm praying, Father, that you will send your Spirit, that you will make them one. That they will be one in their cause, that they will be one in their calling, that they will be one in their mission. And what he's praying for their oneness is that they will go forward and they will carry the gospel of Jesus Christ forward to as many people as they can. And if they work together, it will work. If they start pulling apart, there's factions, and then the disciples splinter, and there's no gospel presented anywhere. So he's praying. Pray for this oneness. Pray for these guys to be one, just as you and I are one. Now with Jesus and the Father and the Holy Spirit, when they are one, there's an intimacy. They are connected at every single level. When they're talking as one. You guys ever talk to yourself in your head? Or talk to yourself out loud? Sometimes I'll be talking to myself in my head, and like my mouth will actually move, but I won't say anything. And then I'll look over, and Emma, my oldest daughter, she'll be looking at me like, oh, you're crazy, you're a weirdo. So we all do that. But that's the Father and that's the Son. They are intimate. They are intimately connected. They know each other's thoughts. And that's what he's praying for these guys. He's praying for that oneness, for them to be united in thought, united in action, united in purpose. Now, they still didn't finish there, because he prayed for himself, he prayed for his disciples, but later on, in just a little bit, he prays for us. He prays for you. He prays for me. He's praying for a oneness for us. Starting in verse 20. I do not pray for these alone, but also for those who will believe in me through their word. He's praying for us, for those that will believe through the disciples. That they may be one, as you, Father, are in me and I in you. That they also may be one in us, that the world might believe that you sent me. And the glory which you gave me I have given them, that they may be one just as we are one. I in them, and you in me, that they may be made perfect in one, and that the world may know that you have sent me, and have loved them as you have loved me. He's praying for oneness for his disciples. He's praying for oneness for us. He knows that later on, there's going to be splits inside of churches, splits inside of denominations. And he's praying, he's not saying, I want everybody to be one global church. He knows that there's not going to be a global church. In fact, later on in Revelation, it'll talk about that one church. But what he's talking about is that we are united in cause, that we are united in purpose. I have some friends that they go to a very charismatic church, and they practice worship in a different way that I practice worship. But you know what? When we come together and pray, we are united. We are united in purpose. We are praying and worshiping to glorify God. That is our whole purpose. Now, there is a quote that I like to get to. A.W. Tozer is this pretty much mid-19th century, 20th century prophet. This guy is very knowledgeable, very wise, very profound if you read him. But I was listening to one of his messages on unity, and what he talked about is that when a church decides to go its own way, when churches get factions inside of their body, inside of their thing, when groups are wanting to do their own thing, this, that, and the other, God's blessing cannot come down. God will not bless disunity. He will not bless that. In fact, he says this. He says, unity of mind on the part of the people of God precedes the blessing. When we are unified as a body, when we are unified in Christ, when we are unified in purpose, in mission, God will pour out his blessing upon us. He will pour out his blessing upon this church. He will pour out his blessing upon this movement that we are trying to do inside of Beaumont and Banning, inside of the Pass area. He will pour it out. If we start deciding to do one thing over here, and one person decides to do something over there, and one person decides to do something over there, God can't bless that. There's disunity. But when we are focused in purpose, when we are realizing that our whole goal, our focus at Impact is to glorify God by intentionally making people aware of Christ together, he can bless that. He will bless that. He will pour out his Spirit upon us and give us strength to go out and go forward and win people to Christ. That's what we're here for. That's our whole goal, is to point people back to the cross. That's what your goal is. That's what my goal is to point people back to the cross. Sometimes inside of work, we don't have that mission. We don't have that focus. We don't have that purpose. That one guy that's changed us and divided us and torn us apart, that guy is caustic. But what we need to do is we need to become a cheerleader for that guy. We need to inspire that guy to become a team player. Instead of being the quarterback that's a pain, we need to be the person that's coming around and saying, hey, we can do this, and be the uniter. We have to be the one that comes back and says, you know what, let's come back to the mission. Let's come back to the focus. Let's come back to what our purpose is. That's what Jesus was praying for. That's the example that he gave us. And it all starts because we are praying for that person. We are praying for our work environment, that we can get on board and we can follow the mission and accomplish the mission. The floor is creaky. Hope it doesn't come out on the camera. And the same thing goes with our marriage. If we're in our marriage and our marriage is kind of messed up, we need to put our focus back to the cross, put our focus back to Christ. What is our marriage going to do? What is our marriage meant to do? Our marriage is meant to glorify God and to focus back to God. Sometimes it might not happen. It might not work out that way. But we can still glorify God in our life. My baseball team. It wasn't until my dad focused us back to what our goal was that we were able to start winning. Once he refocused us and brought us back to where we were supposed to be, we started winning games. Once our marriages get back together and we start focusing on what the mission is, to glorify Christ in our marriage and glorify Christ in our raising of our kids, our focus becomes clear and we are able to get the blessing that God has told us about, that God has promised us. In this church, in this body, when we come together and we focus on what God has for us, God will pour out his Spirit. Think for a minute, think for just a few minutes of what it would look like if these, what do we got,